Everybody in this room has seen that Russia has been targeting Ukraine's energy and industrial infrastructure in a series of devastating and deadly attacks, bombardments. When Ukraine is facing such an existential threat, is the green transition a priority for your government?
Hello, Greece. Thank you for this opportunity to be present on the occasion. Thank you for the possibility to give the updates of situation in Ukraine. This is extremely important, and just a few weeks ago it was in Gdansk for Ukraine Recovery Conference, and we're thankful to our Greece partners to be present there as well. Coming back to your question, of course, this is an extremely hard situation going on in Ukraine. It's not the first day, not first month, and not first year. Unfortunately, we're facing the threats 4.5 years, and of course, we're getting stronger. Today, Ukraine is ready to be part as a partnership and giving our suggestions and experience and sharing it with our European colleagues. And actually, our expertise are in a worldwide focus. The energy sector is extremely important, and this winter was very hard for Ukraine for two reasons. First of all, it's the strikes on our critical infrastructure. First of all, we're talking about energy sector, as well as the hard winter by weather. So we are today already in the process preparing for the next winter season. And this is the position of the President of Ukraine, Mr. Zelensky. President Zelensky launched a resilience plan for four specific sectors. It's the heating supply, the water supply, the protection of the critical infrastructure, and of course the energy sector in general on behalf of the Minister of Energy. So we are in the process of all types of alternative energy supplies, and of course we're thankful to our international partners for the not only staying strong with Ukraine, which is very and extremely important today and every day actually, but also for giving the expertise, giving the needed equipment for energy and for the critical infrastructure security. So this is where we're talking about also our plans for the recovery. Recovery plan is also a big part of our Ministry of Development, and we are today talking also about new technologies. So we're using AI as a help to go faster, to go more transparent, and to go more strategically specific for the critical infrastructure, for the energy sector, and in the comprehensive recovery of all our towns, cities, gromadas, and so on.
Well, thank you very much for that and for keeping to the time. I guess the follow-up question to that is in terms of the help that you are receiving from your partners, your EU partners and other countries, what help are you getting that is vital at the moment, and what more do you need?
Well, the winter was, as I mentioned, very challenged. So generators, all type of equipment that can support the energy sector was extremely important. But today we can also talk about alternative energy sectors if we talk about this topic today, but also when we talk about recovery, it's about people. And of course, our ministry, as the ministry responsible for 11 different policies, and one of them it's the regional policies. So we're talking about frontline regions. It's different types of protection of population, and the state is responsible to give the best possible conditions for people to stay on the ground and to keep running their life there, the economy, but as well to come back from other countries to have our nation supported with new experience. And once again, we're thankful to Greece and other countries in Europe and worldwide for this support.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for joining us. And, we really appreciate the time that you've taken. I understand that you have to leave us and disconnect, but Ukraine will remain part of our discussions this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, colleagues.
Okay, turning to you now, Franz. I guess you want to respond to what you heard I know you do, yes, in the previous two sessions, probably to castigate some people or some ideas. So I was going to ask you, the state of play, is the green transition still on track? You can answer that as well. What are the challenges? So 3 minutes.
Yes. You're right. After having 2 sessions of drill, baby, drill, I want to offer perhaps a slightly different perspective on issues. Last June, temperatures in Europe were 3 degrees higher than in the last decade of the previous century. In Germany, since the beginning of the summer, 5,000 people have died because of this extra heat. France is faced with a challenge. 3 heat waves already this year, more coming. Fires everywhere, people dying, huge power plants being shut down because the water is simply too warm to cool. This is Europe. Europe is affected by the climate crisis more than any other part of the world. Our response to the climate crisis is of high importance. People challenging methane legislation should consider that methane has 80% higher effect on the CO2 emissions than CO2. 80% in the short run. Over 100 years is a bit less, but in the first 20 years, reducing methane emissions is critical, and the legislation, in my view, should not be touched. This should be implemented. And by the way, if an oil company complains about that, an oil company that has made in the second quarter of this year $15 billion profit, I think they can be more forthcoming in trying to help us decarbonize the economy. Now, second point I quickly want to make. Europe will not be secure if Europe is not sovereign in the energy field. And for that, we need everything. Now, we need to reduce carbon emissions. We need to install, and we can install, huge amounts of renewable energy. Our biggest problem is that grids are not keeping up, and I think we need, and there Enrico Letta is absolutely right, we absolutely need a capital markets union so that we have enough capital to bring our grids up to standard, and then in combination with also hydrocarbons. I'm not rejecting hydrocarbons, but we need to reduce their role, and I'm sure we will be at maximum 30% in 2050. I'm sure about that, because renewables are simply much cheaper, and they come much quicker, especially in combination with renewable next generation nuclear energy generation. I believe in that combination. I'm not excluding hydrocarbons, but you should not overestimate their role. And we should keep in mind that Europe is suffering because of climate change, and we need to address that. We need to drastically reduce CO2 emissions, and we need to stick to our legislation. Final point, we also need to quickly reduce our supply lines, because the supply lines are vulnerable. What happens in the Strait of Hormuz can happen everywhere because of the newest drone technology. Sea drones are cheap, and they can disrupt any supply line. So proximity of supply lines becomes crucial. That's why this part of Europe, as far as hydrocarbons are concerned, and there I join the previous panels, is of such critical importance, because the supply lines are much shorter. But long supply lines, to be dependent on producers that might want to blackmail you, and I'm referring not just to the Russians, I'm also referring to some of the things said by the American president. That is not Europe's future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very disciplined, but still minus 41 seconds, which I may have to deduct from the next answer. I'm going to put the second question to you, Franz, as well, which is, how is the EU adapting its energy strategy in response both to the, you've talked about this a little bit now, geopolitical and tech disruption? So
Well,
Yeah.
I would repeat what I said earlier. There will be no security in Europe without energy sovereignty. And for energy sovereignty, we need to increase our production, especially of electricity, much, much faster. Electricity needs to become much cheaper. That's the only way our industry can adapt and compete. And we need a lot more electricity because we are not that far behind in terms of the new industries, but the lack of grids and energy supply is slowing us down unnecessarily. So I passionately want us to increase electricity production. The quickest way and the cheapest way of doing this is through solar energy. A cheap way is offshore wind if we can get the grids to work, and in combination with modern nuclear, in combination also with hydrocarbons, but especially I would concentrate on natural gas, not on oil, if I can give that small piece of advice. And then this combination can put Europe in a very, very good place. We could never again be in a position that we can be blackmailed by energy suppliers. That is of geostrategic importance. And we need to create new forms of cooperation. Energy could be a basis, on the basis of the EU, that would allow Britain and Norway and Ukraine and other countries to join, because energy and security are inseparable. The climate crisis, energy and security are also inseparable. The climate crisis, if it is not contained, we're at 1.5 degrees. Imagine what would happen if we go beyond a 2 degrees increase. That would by itself also create a very serious security challenge to Europe because of the migration it will create, because of the health crisis, because of the security crisis, because the economies will suffer. So we have so many reasons to not abandon the green agenda and to reframe it perhaps. Why not call the Green Deal the sovereignty deal or the security deal? I don't care, the liberty deal, whatever you want to call it. But understand that our energy transition, fighting climate change, and our sovereignty as a continent and our economic future in a world that is rapidly developing in this way are all interlinked. If we want to keep up with China, that has understood this. Look at what's happening in decarbonizing their economy. Look at what's happening in battery production in China, the innovation that is happening. We need to be part of that world. And don't underestimate the levels of investment in the United States in renewables. It is very often hidden, but the private sector has made a choice in the US, and it's also going into that direction. So there is more to this world than drill, baby, drill. Let's embrace it.
Well, thank you very much, Frans. Straight over to you, Mr. Tsefos now. Is Greece on track to meet its green energy targets by 2030? And what are the priorities in terms of meeting them in the short term?
Well, thank you for the question and for the invitation to be here. Greece has undergone a remarkable transformation in its energy system over the last 2 decades. If you look at our emissions, if that's where we want to start, we've had an almost 50% reduction in emissions since 2005, which is the peak year, about 33% relative to 1990, which is the baseline year for EU calculations. Some of that was driven by the economic contraction that obviously Greece went through, but the primary driver of decarbonization in the country has been the phasing out of lignite. If you go back 20 years, almost 40% of our emissions in Greece were generated from lignite. Even 2 years ago, after we've gone through a remarkable decline in lignite, 2 years ago, in 2023, the emissions from lignite equaled the emissions from all the cars in Greece. So getting out of lignite has been a remarkable project for us. We are almost there. We've had a 93% reduction in generation from lignite since 2005. But one of the things that we have discovered is that this is not primarily driven by environmental concerns, although those are certainly there. It's driven by economics. We are blessed with an incredible sun, which you can just step out and feel on your skin. We are blessed with incredible wind, which these days is not blowing quite as much as we would like it to, but it usually is. We are number 3 in the world in terms of the penetration of solar. We are number 9 in the world in the penetration of wind. And one of the things that is remarkable is that when this government took office in 2019, we were a massive net importer of electricity. We were one of the largest net importers of electricity in all of Europe. If you fast forward to the present, we are not only a net electricity exporter, but we're actually one of the largest net electricity exporters in all of Europe. If you look at the math so far this year, it's France, Sweden, Netherlands, Spain, Greece. We're the 5th largest net exporter of electricity in all of Europe. So we believe that the world is turning to resources that we have in abundance, and that creates a huge opportunity for us. What are the priorities? In terms of decarbonization, decarbonizing the electricity sector, continuing with phasing out lignite, connecting our islands, which still run on oil, and that's a huge chunk of the decarbonization agenda over the next 6-7 years. We're also decarbonizing our industrial sector. We have secured almost €1 billion from various European funds for setting up a carbon capture and storage value chain, primarily aimed at refineries and the cement industry. And we also see, of course, growing move towards electrification of transportation. Buildings are an important element. It's not a very cold country, so buildings are not a huge source of emissions, but we've also made a historic investment in renovations as a result of the RRF funding that was available to us.
Excellent, thanks. Right on time. Second question to you is concerns really the affordability question, price question, or that's part of it anyway. So apropos, some of these issues, what kind of energy and climate policies is Greece pursuing at the EU level?
Well, I think at the EU level, we see several things happening at the same time. One, we really don't have an internal market in Europe for electricity. In fact, we have less of an internal market today than we did 5 years ago. So 5 years ago, the prices in Europe, before COVID and before the energy crisis, were closer to each other than they are today. So oddly enough, Europe is becoming less interconnected. We have less of an internal market today than we did 4 or 5 years ago. That creates huge missed opportunities because we have one part of Europe that is curtailing electricity, has zero prices, and another part of Europe that may have 150, 200, 300 euros a megawatt hour price. Sometimes you see these distinctions across one border. So we are huge believers in driving the internal market, and we were very pleased with the initiative from the Commission about the grids package, which we supported from day one. That's sort of one element. On the other side, we are a believer in a cost-effective transition. And here, I think what we're seeing is a little bit of target fatigue and a little bit of micromanagement. I will confess even publicly that even though I'm an energy expert, I don't think I can tell you off the top of my head all the targets that we have to meet by 2030. So I think there is an argument to be made for, yes, decarbonization, but let's give more leeway for countries to pick their own pathway. So in Greece, I mentioned it before, buildings are 7% of emissions because we're not a cold country. We don't use a huge amount of energy for heating. We may approach buildings differently than a country where buildings are 30, 40, 50% of emissions. We may not have an equal need to renovate as you may have in different parts of Europe. So we are big believers in finding the right flexibility between the top line target but not having too many intermediate sub-targets, which are the ones that really give rise to the cost of the transition. The last part is on the broader architecture. And I think here we would probably call for a slightly bigger course correction, where we think the ambition is great, but what we've noticed is that sometimes decarbonization, when it conflicts with other things that we care about, we always put decarbonization first. And that's really important to have decarbonization as a target, but sometimes you have to weigh decarbonization against other things. And let me give you an example. When the crisis started in the Middle East, I could tell you off the top of my head what the emissions were of the 4 refineries in Greece. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head the amount of diesel and jet fuel they produced. And let me tell you, on March 1st, I was asking how much diesel and how much jet fuel they produce. So we really have to find a way to do decarbonization, but with also not losing our eye from energy security and affordability, and also the competitiveness of our industry, where we think we have to find the right balance between continuing to push for decarbonization, but when it clashes with competitiveness or affordability, we have to make sure that we can recalibrate the approach so that we move together with our societies and our companies.
Thank you. Now I see why you were a debating champion in a former life. I think maybe you were. Mr. Ruby, You have argued that electrification is the solution for the climate and increasingly the energy security and competitiveness question. I guess the question is how to get there faster. What are the prerequisites for a successful transition?
Thank you. If you allow me just to respond to a few of the things that were said in previous panels. I think right now the situation that we're facing in Europe is one where we have to say that the crisis is doing a part of the job of essentially convincing us as a political entity and consumers to do the right thing, which is to electrify. You know, the crisis that we're going through, the energy crisis, is really a crisis of imported fossil fuels. I think there can be no doubt about that. And we heard many arguments, some of them convincing for drilling here in Europe, and I think there might be some sense to that in certain regions. What we need to remember is that we're never going to power ourselves with fossil fuels in Europe. We're going to continue to import. We import today more than 90%, and even more drilling is not going to change that materially. So the way forward is really to electrify. That is what's really crucial. The good news is that due to the pain at the pump, which is real for consumers, they are actually taking action on themselves. We're seeing a significant increase in the sales of electric cars as a consequence of this crisis. We're seeing people beginning to consider new solutions in their own homes. If we want to take this to the next level, which is what is needed, we're looking at essentially having up to half of all energy supplied by electricity by 2040. That is very substantial. And essentially, three things need to happen in order for that to work. First of all, we need to change the supply. We need to expand the electricity system very materially. And we need to think of the supply in a holistic manner. That means it needs to be decarbonized, but it needs to be stable more than anything else. And I think Franz said some very wise things here. Renewables will be the bulk of this new system. Nuclear will play a role. And then we need to have a residual amount of hydrocarbons to stabilize the system. We must make sure, however, that we also deploy the storage solutions, short-term storage, but also increasingly long-term storage solutions, and make the business models for them. The good news is that this is coming by itself into the market. We're seeing that emerge now. So we need to make sure that in a society where more and more of our energy is based on electricity, that electricity is reliable. So that's on the supply side. The demand side, we need then to gradually also transform the energy uses across all major segments of the economy. In his time as Vice President of the Commission, I think Franz did a lot of very good things to essentially couple the decarbonization agenda with the transformation of the energy system, introduction of renewables, but also electrification of the broader system. So the fleet initiative that we have on cars right now is very important. Now the next frontier is really industry and making sure that it is sufficiently attractive for industry to electrify. And the last point here is about that switch, and that's really about pricing, making sure that we have an attractive, affordable energy source in electricity, and that's a lot about the regulatory frameworks.
Thank you. Well, what more can be done to make electrification the kind of savvy choice for industry? You know, how big is the investment gap? How can it be filled?
So I think, first of all, it's really important to acknowledge and recognize the opportunity here. The academic studies show that the vast majority, more than 90% of all industrial processes can be electrified. Right now, the business case is not there for all of them, but if we look towards the low and medium temperature segments, actually the business case is there, the technologies are there, and it's all about doing it. I think it's very natural for an individual company to sort of think for a moment, wait a second, so here's a completely new technology, there's a risk to my cash flow, there's a risk to getting on the grid, it looks a bit messy, the whole thing. So we need to have a cultural change, we need to have the right incentives to make this happen for industry. And further to the discussions about the regulatory framework, I think the next stage of this ETS system in Europe is to really make this not only, let's say, an investment signal out of fossil fuels, but also an anchor for industrial policy for the future solutions. That's really going to be a major game changer for industries to increasingly embrace electricity, which is the domestic source of energy in Europe.
Great, thank you so much. Mr. Bruton, you're the Director General of Nuclear Europe, and that's the Association of the European Nuclear Industry. Can you take us through the nuclear investments currently planned across Europe and explain how those are going to support the green transition?
Yes, thank you, Joan, and thank you very much for the invitation. So indeed, if you take nuclear energy today in the EU, we have nuclear power plants in 12 EU member states. It's roughly 100 gigawatts of installed capacity, and it provides 24% of Europe's electricity. When we look at planned investments in the different EU member states, from 100 gigawatts today, we should move towards 150 gigawatts by 2050. What are we talking about? We're talking about expanding the lifetime of existing reactors, which I would argue today is actually the cheapest investment you can do to deliver clean electricity. We're talking, of course, about new large reactors with significant investment programs, typically today in Poland, in Czech Republic, Slovakia, of course France, but also many other countries which are investing in large reactors. And we're also talking about small modular reactors, which are a new technology. They're a bit different. They still have to be proven. We expect them to arrive and be in operation in the EU in the early 2030. They're also a very different technology. They're more modular, they're standardized. They can also offer very specific services, such as heating, for instance, in addition to electricity, and also serve the needs of typically of energy-intensive sectors or data centers. So that's a bit the portfolio of investment. Now, how will this contribute to the EU energy system? I think the value of nuclear is well recognized by all the member states that have this energy, so it's fully decarbonized. It's, of course, great in terms of security of supply, and it has this very specificity for a low-carbon energy source to be fully dispatchable and available 24/7. This makes, of course, nuclear very important, also, in terms of satisfying the end customer of electricity. But something which is really important and which we're doing a lot of work at Nuclear Europe to demonstrate the value of nuclear. I think where investments in nuclear bring value is also in terms of energy system. We're very much convinced, the future mix will be indeed a mix of predominantly, as you said, renewables and nuclear. Nuclear, thanks to its 24/7 availability, is a great energy source. You actually always need some type of baseload energy into the energy system. And the studies we've done as Nuclear Europe actually show that with a reasonable share of nuclear in the energy system, you save on balancing costs, you save on transmission costs as well. So you actually manage to keep the overall energy system costs in check. And I would like really to insist on this aspect. When I was in Paris for the Nuclear Energy Summit earlier this year in March, Greek Prime Minister Mitsotakis actually said, in Greece we have no short-term plans to do nuclear, but I'm here actually to encourage you as my European neighbors to develop nuclear because we need it from a European perspective. And that's all I think we're all about, is having a nuclear will help the entire EU.
Thanks very much. So in that context, what does the sector need from policymakers in terms of attracting investment into nuclear?
Let me first start by saying that the overall policy framework for nuclear is improving, and I think it's important to recognize change when it's actually happening. Certainly in Brussels, we've seen significant changes on the narrative around nuclear, with a recognition, including at the highest level of the European Commission, that really what we need is now clean homegrown electricity, which means renewable and nuclear, and that's really great. Having said this, as a representative association of the sector in Brussels, we still consider that this has to be turned into very concrete policies. And let me take 3 examples. Firstly, the long-term policy framework. What we had in the past with the EU were renewable targets, and I think these made a lot of sense because you wanted to kickstart this industry and to help it grow. But coming back to the target fatigue, Nikos, that you alluded to earlier, from our perspective, it will be very important that going forward, we have a framework supporting all sources of clean energy. And that's really important. And you know, so very much in favor from our side of, you know, some form of clean energy target going ahead. And this is very important for us because we're in the industry of the long term, so we need the long-term policy signals. And we also need to see from the Commission more proactive policies to support nuclear. The second point, which is fundamental for nuclear, is the issue of financing. Again, you know, you're talking about very long-term investments where we only generate money after a few years when the construction is done and the site is operational. So financing is very much a core issue. There, for many years, nuclear was excluded from the vast majority of EU funding mechanism. I think this is something which needs to change. And there, let me be extremely clear. I'm not talking about taking 20 billion euros of EU budget and putting it in a new nuclear power plant, not at all. But what we're seeing on the nuclear side is having just a bit of EU support actually helps us to attract private investors. And there, you know, we've seen positive signal with the European Investment Bank. They've started to finance nuclear. We had 2 large projects being financed actually last year, and I think more are to come, and that's very positive. Last policy angle, which is important, the supply chain. Nuclear is actually one of the only very net zero supply chain to be fully based in the EU. So we can do more or less everything from A to Z in Europe. And that's something, yeah, but you know, even mining uranium, we could potentially do it now in Sweden. They've lifted the ban, so you know, we could get there. So I think we need to be supported there. There are many very important EU policies, the Industrial Accelerator Act, also support for SMRs, which is important.
Thank you so much. Mr. Manusakis, IPTO, transmission operator. Greece's renewables growth has been impressive, as we've heard, but critics argue that the system is being stretched with curtailments, grid constraints, and so on. Are we moving fast enough in the right way?
Thank you very much for the invitation here and for the question. And if you allow me, I will switch to Greek. I love to hear the language and speak it when I'm allowed.
Of course, please. I think everybody has headphones, yeah.
Ερχόμαστε κάποια συνεχόμενα χρόνια εδώ και πράγματι πανηγυρίζουμε για τη μεγάλη επιτυχία της Ελλάδας σε ανανεώσιμες πηγές ενέργειας. Μία αυτονόητη επιλογή, κατά τη γνώμη μου, λαμβάνοντας υπόψη το ηλιακό και αιωλικό δυναμικό που διαθέτει η χώρα. Η χώρα έχει ως στόχο και τα τελευταία 7 χρόνια της διακυβέρνησης έχει πετύχει ουσιαστικά το στόχο να είναι αυτόνομη ενεργειακά σε πολύ μεγάλο βαθμό. Θα πω ορισμένα νούμερα για να γίνει κατανοητό. Το πικ της Ελλάδας σε ισχύ στην χειρότερη μέρα του καλοκαιριού είναι γύρω στα 10 γιγαβάτ. Έχουμε ήδη 19 γιγαβάτ ΑΠΕ στο σύστημα και 13 γιγαβάτ ακόμη που έχουν πάρει όρους σύνδεσης και αν λάβει κανείς υπόψη του ότι 90-95% από αυτά κατασκευάζονται, στην πραγματικότητα έχουμε πιάσει ήδη τους στόχους του 2030. Αυτό είχε ως αποτέλεσμα μια χρονιά που είχαμε λίγο καλύτερα νερά, το 2025 να γίνουμε αμέσως εξαγωγικοί και από εδώ και πέρα θα είμαστε full εξαγωγικοί. Άρα η Ελλάδα έχει ανέβει κατηγορία, είναι κάτι πάρα πολύ σημαντικό για την ενεργειακή πολιτική της χώρας. Από εκεί και πέρα, προφανώς, φτάνοντας σε ένα τόσο υψηλό ποσοστό διείσδυσης ανανεώσιμων πηγών, είμαστε στο 55% αυτή τη στιγμή ήδη, το περισσότερο του χρόνου και αρκετές μέρες έχουμε την ικανότητα ακόμη και το 100% να καλύψουμε. Προφανώς υπάρχει πλεονάζουσα ενέργεια. Αυτό αφενός μας κάνει εξαγωγικούς, αφετέρου με την ανάπτυξη της αποθήκευσης που ήδη έχει ξεκινήσει θα μειώσει περαιτέρω τις τιμές το αμέσως επόμενο διάστημα. Έχουμε ήδη 530 ΜΒ να λειτουργούν, θα έχουμε αποθήκευσης, θα έχουμε 1 γιγαβάτ μέχρι το τέλος του χρόνου. Τις αμέσως επόμενες μέρες, εβδομάδες θα δώσουμε όρους σύνδεσης για εκατοντάδες, 300 με 400 ΜΒ ακόμη αποθήκευσης και έχουμε και όρους σύνδεσης που έχουμε δώσει σε αυτόνομες μονάδες αποθήκευσης στη τάξη του 1,4 ΓΒ. Άρα, περιμένουμε ακόμη καλύτερα νέα σε ό,τι αφορά την ενεργειακή μετάβαση, την απαθρακοποίηση του ηλεκτρικού συστήματος, για να είμαι ακριβής, της χώρας, το αμέσως επόμενο διάστημα. Για την Ελλάδα θα έλεγα ότι το επόμενο βήμα, εφόσον έχει πάει τόσο καλά η απαθρακοποίηση του ηλεκτρικού συστήματος, είναι η συνολικότερη τάση προς τον εξηλεκτρισμό της οικονομίας. καθώς αυτή τη στιγμή ακόμη, γιατί λαμβάνοντας υπόψη όλες τις ανάγκες της ελληνικής οικονομίας, εισάγουμε περίπου το 75 με 77% των αναγκών μας σε ενέργεια συνολικά. Έχουμε έργα οραματικά, όπως είναι το cold ironing, όπως είναι η γενίκευση της φόρτισης των αυτοκινήτων, έτσι ώστε η γενίκευση της θέρμανσης με ηλεκτρική ενέργεια των κτηρίων, η χρήση της ηλεκτρικής ενέργειας και στην βιομηχανική παραγωγή, έτσι ώστε να προχωρήσει ο εξηλεκτρισμός της χώρας, κάτι το οποίο είναι, νομίζω, και προς το εθνικό συμφέρον, πέρα από όλους τους άλλους λόγους που αναπτύχθηκαν από τους προηγούμενους ομιλητές προηγουμένως.
Great, thank you. Greece is obviously investing very heavily in interconnections, interconnectors, which are very capital intensive and take a long time to deliver. So what is the strategic payoff here? What's the real payoff?
Ευχαριστώ για αυτή την ερώτηση, γιατί δημιουργείται στο κοινό μία σύγχυση όταν ακούει τα τεράστια νούμερα του CAPEX που χρειάζονται για τις ηλεκτρικές διασυνδέσεις και θεωρούνται ακριβά έργα. Στην πραγματικότητα, αυτό που θα ήταν ακριβότερο θα ήταν να μην γίνουν οι ηλεκτρικές διασυνδέσεις, για παράδειγμα, των ελληνικών νησιών που έχουν γίνει. Έχουν ήδη διασυνδεθεί οι Κυκλάδες μέσα στους επόμενους μήνες. Για όσους επισκέπτεστε τις Κυκλάδες, ελπίζω το καλοκαίρι θα είναι όλες πια οι Κυκλάδες διασυνδεδεμένες. Έχει ήδη διασυνδεθεί η Κρήτη και το αμέσως επόμενο διάστημα, με βάση το επιχειρηματικό μας πλάνο, θα διασυνδεθούν τα νησιά του Βορείου Αιγαίου, τα Δωδεκάνησα και θα γίνει και η δεύτερη διασύνδεση της Ελλάδας με την Ιταλία. Χωρίς αυτές τις διασυνδέσεις θα είχαμε ένα πολύ μεγαλύτερο κόστος ηλεκτρικής ενέργειας λόγω του πολύ ακριβού καυσίμου, του πετρελαίου που χρησιμοποιούν οι παλαιές μονάδες στα νησιά. Συνεπώς, οι διασυνδέσεις είναι έργα τα οποία από άποψη κόστους-οφέλους, ακόμη και για μικρά νησιωτικά συστήματα όπως είναι τα Δωδεκάνησα, είναι υπέρ των καταναλωτών και επίσης είναι υπέρ και της αύξησης της ποιότητας του τουριστικού προϊόντος, που είναι πάρα πολύ σημαντικό για την Ελλάδα, αλλά και της ενεργειακής ασφάλειας των νησιών. Διότι όταν έχεις μονάδες δεκαετιών οι οποίες είναι παλαιές και ρυπογόνες, έχεις μεγαλύτερη πιθανότητα βλαβών και μειώνεις την ποιότητα του περιβάλλοντος και του τουριστικού προϊόντος, αλλά και γενικότερα όταν εξαρτάσαι από το να έρχεται υγρό ή οποιοδήποτε τύπο ορυκτό καύσιμο, ουσιαστικά εξαρτάσαι από όλη τη μεταβλητότητα των συνθηκών που υπάρχουν γύρω. Άρα νομίζω ότι οι ηλεκτρικές διασυνδέσεις για την Ελλάδα είναι μονόδρομος και είναι πολύ σωστό ότι τα προχωράμε τόσο γρήγορα. Ολοκληρώσαμε μόλις μια αύξηση μετοχικού κεφαλαίου, στην οποία, για να καταλάβετε, ζητήσαμε 250 εκατομμύρια από την αγορά και ήρθαν 3,5 δισεκατομμύρια. Και επίσης αξίζει να πω ότι κορυφαία επενδυτικά κεφάλαια που διαχειρίζονται 3 εκατομμύρια μας ρωτούσαν για έργα που εμείς με ταπεινό τρόπο λέγαμε ότι είναι ανώριμα, όπως η διασύνδεση της Ελλάδας με την Αίγυπτο, που σχεδιάζεται αυτή τη στιγμή, η διασύνδεση της Ελλάδας με τη Σαουδική Αραβία, και μας έλεγαν ότι θέλουν να συμμετέχουν σε αυτά τα έργα, ότι πιστεύουν σε αυτά τα έργα και θέλουν να συμμετέχουν. Και τέλος, μια κουβέντα να πω ότι, κατά τη γνώμη μου, το ίδιο ισχύει και για την Ευρώπη. Είπε προηγουμένως ο Υπουργός, πολύ σωστά, ότι για να έχουμε ενιαία ευρωπαϊκή αγορά ηλεκτρικής ενέργειας πρέπει να είμαστε διασυνδεδεμένοι στην Ευρώπη. Αυτό είναι η ευρωπαϊκή αλληλεγγύη. Έτσι θα ενοποιηθούν οι αγορές, έτσι θα έχουμε μια ενιαία τιμή. Ευρωπαϊκή αλληλεγγύη είναι να διασυνδεθεί περισσότερο η Ισπανία με τη Γαλλία. Ευρωπαϊκή αλληλεγγύη είναι η νοτιοανατολική Ευρώπη να έχει ένα πιο πυκνό δίκτυο, ούτως ώστε να μην υπάρχει διαφορά των τιμών ανάμεσα σε αυτές που είναι στην Αυστρία και σε αυτές που έχουμε στην Ελλάδα. Η Δανία, για παράδειγμα, που έχει κατά 80% αιωλική ενέργεια για να καλύψει το μείγμα της, πολλοί λένε πώς υπάρχει ενέργεια όταν δεν φυσάει ο αέρας. Η Δανία είναι διασυνδεδεμένη τόσο ισχυρά, ούτως ώστε να μην έχει κανένα πρόβλημα. Αυτό θα ισχυροποιήσει την ενεργειακή αγορά και την οικονομία της Ευρώπης, κατά τη γνώμη μου.
Well, thank you so much. All of you so far have been incredibly disciplined, stuck well within the time. We now going to have a kind of a legal and academic perspective from our last two panelists. So, Christina, just to reflect on what you've heard, what would you say then are the new trends or challenges affecting the energy market in Greece? So, and if you can do below 3 minutes, that would be great.
Thank you very much for your question, and thank you for being part of this STEAM panel. I would like to focus on 3 pillars, 3 keywords that I think that have make the whole image of the energy market in Greece. The first one relates to centralization. The second to financialization, but also we have other parts in the community of energy that focuses on instrumentalization. As for centralization, we have energy exchange in Greece that operates as an EMO-nominated electricity market operator, and this marketplace function is rather important in terms of covering all inherent risks and in terms of serving the needs of market players. So it covers market risk, it covers counterparty risk, it covers settlement risk, market abuse risk, and this is an efficient, effective market condition. With regard to the efficiency of the market, instrumentalization, I would like to focus on energy not only as transactions, but also as energy products, as instruments that are developed, that they are issued in a way in order to provide to the market standardized conditions and under which conditions the market can operate, for example, in the area of market coupling regulation, in the area of risk management and clearing regulation. We provide conditions to the stakeholders, to commodity people in terms of hedging risk. And also we have financial products that aim at providing hedging tools for market players. So this is a coherent, this is a holistic approach combining both spot and derivatives products. But last but not least, I would like to underline also the functionality of the market regarding PPAs, which is the main part of the EU green market agenda. And here in Greece, we implemented also the facility of PPA platform. The energy exchange has a centralized platform where suppliers, producers, the buying side, the selling side can meet each other, interact. It's not a trading platform, and provide these facilities. And this is very important in terms of having decarbonization regime.
Thank you very much. So based on your experience in both the energy and the financial sector, would you say that there is an optimal model for the energy sector in terms of enhancing efficiency and also, having the positive effect on the environmental footprint?
Yeah, thank you for this question.
2 minutes.
It relates to the market model. Commodity people were not alone anymore. They have financial people. They have financial people in order to support their needs and in order to protect them against all these risks. Therefore, the optimal model might be a model under which we can have combined service approaches by having not only spot energy products, wholesale energy products, but also financial products. And I totally agree with the approach on capital markets. Capital markets can serve all these goals by providing experts, FMIs, financial market infrastructures, not only trading platforms, but also clearing houses, central counterparties that can absorb and hedge and manage all these risks. And of course, we can have the regulators here. We have European regulatory maturity, we have convergence, and we have harmonized supervision. We have ACER and ESMA combining between each other in terms of serving in the most effective, efficient manner in serving sustainable markets for the stakeholders, for the economy and the society as well. Therefore, in Greece, we also have the energy regulator, and we have Hellenic Capital Market Commission, we have MOUs in place, and we implement measures in order to proceed, in order to take into account the needs of the stakeholders with regard to this to these markets. So it's very important also to focus on the PPAs and say that in other countries we have, for example, in Italy, trading platforms for PPAs. Why won't you see the solution of opting for more tradable conditions for PPAs as well? This is the cost efficiency and effectiveness in my point of view. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much. Andreas, I think you're going to have the last word as we go towards the conclusion of our panel. So from a political economy perspective, what would you identify as the kind of bottlenecks to speeding up the green transition? Is it technology? Is it finance? Is it infrastructure? Is it politics? What is it?
Okay, thanks also for the privilege of being last, which means I have to avoid being repetitive, which is difficult, but maybe I'll summarize because a lot of the points that were made here, I think, come together. First, let me say that I think the problem in Europe is that we haven't decarbonized fast enough. So I want to be a little bit provocative on that front. And it has to do with the bottlenecks. All these bottlenecks are real and they're interconnected. And what's happened is that we haven't adequately addressed them simultaneously. And that has to do with the way we function in terms of not really taking, even though EU in some sense philosophically is on the forefront of systems view, it hasn't happened in practice. Let me start by identifying three interconnected bottlenecks. Infrastructure. We know that there's already been a dramatic fall in the cost of renewables, but cheapest renewables or cheap renewables don't create a functioning energy system. If we look at solar panels, for them to be really effective, you need grids, what we've talked about, you need storage, you need demand flexibility. If we're talking about electric vehicles, we need charging stations, we need electricity, demand, and grid management. Those are central. On the investment side, so another interconnected fundamental bottleneck is investment. Cheap renewables do not automatically mean they're investable renewables. In fact, one of the ironies is that solar is cheap now, wind is cheap, but that doesn't mean that they're attractive to investors. The benefits they provide, we know, are largely public: security, resilience, lower long-term system costs, and decarbonization. Moving in that direction will actually bring the ultimate prices down and make electricity affordable, energy affordable. So what investors need are credible revenues, manageable risks, and acceptable returns. And that's where you need the partnerships between the state and the private sector to ensure that risk is apportioned appropriately and these issues are addressed. Finally, legitimacy. Good economics of moving towards renewables is not enough. Costs and benefits are distributed unevenly. Citizens need to have affordable energy. They need to actually participate in the benefits of the transition. And that means energy democracy, it means collective self-consumption and energy communities. So we have to look at all these bottlenecks and treat them simultaneously.
Thank you. We're kind of out of time, but I just wanted to give you the chance to have a final word, which is and answer the question how Europe can make clean energy more reliable, more, cheaper, importantly, and more socially acceptable.
Okay, so do I have 3 minutes or not?
No, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, so I'll move fast. First, the easiest way to see it is by taking clean energy from the project idea to the final bill. First, clean energy has to be built, and therefore projects need permits, land, local acceptance, grid connections, and predictable rules. So you basically have to make clean energy projects easier and faster to develop. And this goes in the spirit of the Draghi report as well, who's very much in favor of the decarbonization as part of that process. Second, energy has to be moved, and renewables have to be moved, electricity moved and balanced. This is where grids, interconnection, storage, and flexibility become central. So cheap is not enough if it's produced in the wrong place, time, or cannot reach consumers. Third, finance. It has to be financed. So you need credible projects, stable regulation, and predictable revenues. So risks, again, as I said before, have to be allocated fairly, and we have to think of instruments in which that can be used, that can actually ensure that they have credibility and revenue regularity. Fourth, the benefits have to be visible, so citizens have to actually recognize the benefits, see them. We know notoriously how our electricity bills have nothing to do with the actual cost of energy, but are full of levies and municipality levies and so forth that make it difficult for one to recognize their importance. The benefits have to be tangible. People have to see the lower costs, cleaner air, better services, local value creation, and energy communities. So the test is not whether clean energy is cheap at the point of generation. The test is whether it's cheap at the level at which the citizen is paying their bills.